The Joe Rogan Experience.
And I feel at the moment that the UK is kind of failing where America is to a degree succeed, not in obviously in all ways, but when it comes to the idea of freedom and free speech, like I think UK is has pretty fallen to the kind of the woke insistence that you need to control people's language so that you can create this perfect society, which can never come anyway. It's just utopian.
Well, I think it's been co-opted. I think whatever organic version of that emerges naturally from society where where there's an overcorrection. I think in the UK, because you guys don't have free speech laws, because it's just different over there.
Yeah.
You can get away with a lot of crazy shit. Like, first of all, like we should explain what we're talking about. There's more than 12,000 people have been arrested in the UK in the past year for social media posts. And if you read some of those social media posts, they're not even remotely terrifying. It's not like I'm going to grab a knife and go cut the head off of every immigrant I see. Like, hey, buddy, maybe we should lock this guy up and evaluate him. He sounds like a crazy person. Like, no, the immigrants are coming into this fucking country and creating all this crime. Knock on the door, you're going to jail.
I worry that Americans think we're mad. Sometimes I think... We
do.
Yeah, do you?
We do now, yeah. We think you've lost it.
Yeah.
We also think something happened where your leaders are intentionally trying to tank your country. It seems like they're trying to bring in as many migrants as possible, cater to them, not to the British people, and do it openly so that everyone knows what they're doing, and then create chaos on the streets because of it.
Yeah, I mean, people have a phrase for that, anarcho-tyranny, you know, where you punish people who aren't breaking the law, but you protect those who are. And I think with I don't know the extent that Americans know the stat you quoted, that came from the Times newspaper in London, which did a freedom of information request to the police, found out that it's 12,000 a year on average. So that's like 30 a day, not just being investigated or looked into, but being arrested.
But over the last few years only, if you go back, it's only like 1,000 or 500.
It was 3,000 last time we spoke, back in 2020. 3,
was it really a year?
It was.
Back then?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So we already had that problem. I mean,
I didn't know it was that many. That's crazy. Even back then?
It was already really high. I mean, we had stuff like the old stories of like, there was that guy in 2010 who made a joke online about, he was at Doncaster Airport in the UK. He said, oh, if this queue doesn't hurry up, I'm going to blow up the airport. Just a stupid, funny tweet. Mm-hmm. He went all the way to court. That was a full trial. So these laws, and I think what happens with this stuff is people don't realize how long this has been embedded in the UK. We have hate speech laws that are encoded in a number of different legislations. We have a thing called the Public Order Act. We have a thing called Malicious Communications Act. That's from 1988. We have the Communications Act from 2003. And all of these things criminalize, I tell you, I kid you not, the language in the statute books is if it's grossly offensive. That's the phrase. If you post something that is grossly offensive, you can go to court, you can be prosecuted. But, I find...
So subjective.
Well, that's it. What does that even mean? I find laws against free speech to be grossly offensive. Right. So should the British state be arrested? I don't know. And there's one, I think it's in the Malicious Communications Act, where it talks about needless anxiety. Causing needless anxiety can get you arrested. And you think that's not a thing. I can give you a specific example of that.
Do you smoke cigars?
I have once. My friend Winston Marshall,
who I
think I worry that if I try it, I'll cough and I'll look really wimpish and pathetic.
It won't be good for your arguments.
It will backfire. I tell you, it'll undermine everything. It'd be like I'm sitting here with a paper hat on at Christmas, undermining all of my key points.
Right.
I like the flavour and I like being around smokers because my grandmother used to chain smoke around me. So it's kind of...
Oh, boy.
Well, she's Northern Irish, it's the way they do. She used to give me whiskey when I was 3 to calm me down, So
oh, wow.
It's that sort of family.
That's an old thing they used to do with kids. They put it in their babies. They put it in their mouth.
It worked.
Like they would dip their finger in whiskey and rub it on the inside of a kid's mouth.
If you're struggling with a child, get it drunk. That's how you do it. It's old Northern Irish wisdom. I don't think you should scoff at it. It's a good thing. But I'll be more than happy to...
It's grossly offensive.
It's grossly offensive. The example I was going to give was this guy called Darren Brady. And this sounds made up. And whenever I tell people this, it sounds made up. He posted a meme. I don't know if you saw this meme where it was the 4 Progress Pride flags. You know that's got the crazy triangles and stuff in it now.
Uh-huh. You put them all together and they become a swastika.
Exactly that, right? And that was going everywhere. And he posted it. And there's a video of him being arrested, put in handcuffs. He's an army veteran, by the way, right? Put in handcuffs by the police, And the policeman says in the video, you caused someone anxiety. So the actual language from the law is being used for this rearrangement of the... And you know what? That's quite a good satirical point that he was making. It wasn't even his meme. He was just retweeting a meme. But even if it was some horrible, offensive thing, who cares?
How is that offensive?
Well, I guess...
I mean, well, you can find... That's the problem. You could find anything offensive. You could find anything grossly offensive if you're extremely sensitive.
You could. But wasn't there a point to that? I mean, he was kind of saying that the LGBTQIA plus movement has become quite authoritarian.
Yeah.
He's not saying they're actual Nazis. And he's saying, oh, isn't it quite funny that when you put them together, it looks like a swastika? The idea that you get handcuffed for that, to me,
especially
is crazy.
for a retweet, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's retweets, it's tweets, it's posts. We've had memes are the big ones. So there was a guy called Lee Joseph Dunn who went to prison for 8 weeks. That was last year, I think, for 3 memes that he posted.
8 weeks.
8 weeks in prison. So again, I'll tell you what the most offensive of the 3 memes was, and you can tell me whether you think it was worth prison time. He put a picture of some immigrants with knives, and underneath it said, coming to a town near you. And that was it. So I don't know if you think that's worth prison time.
That's the most offensive one?
Of the 3, that's the most.
What's the least offensive one?
I can't remember what the other 2 were. Because I remember I looked at them, I thought, well, that's not even worth... That's not even worth thinking about. But this one was the one that really... Because they say, in England, you're stirring up hatred against minorities through the spreading of the meme.
Right.
You know, but that's clearly not sufficient, you know. And I think in the US you have far more protections. I wonder whether it's to do with the fact that in the US you have the First Amendment. So you have something codified that says you can say what you want. We've never had that.
It's very important, and it didn't seem important 20 years ago or 30 years ago because no one ever looked at England as being that kind of a country that would just put people... Well, obviously, this was all pre-social media.
Yeah.
And England has always been a fairly polite society.
Yes.
But the thing is, like, now pub talk has become illegal, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you say something offensive in a pub, you're subject to be arrested, and they're asking people to turn people in.
There's a thing called the banter ban, which the Labour government was trying to put in. Here's the logic of the banter ban. I'd forgotten about this, but now you've mentioned it. They wanted to introduce this law so that, for instance, if you're working in a bar or a pub and you overhear someone who says something against your protected characteristic, say you're a gay barman, and someone says, oh, I don't like the gays or something, and you overhear it, your employer has a duty to protect you from that kind of hate speech, that kind of harm. So therefore, there's going to be a blanket ban on speech on certain kinds of speech within the pub, right? I would say the guy who's eavesdropping, he's the problem, right? You shouldn't be listening in on other people's conversations. That's a real thing.
Yes.
And I guess it all comes down to this view, which I think is completely wrong, that words and violence are the same thing, that words can create a more violent society, that there's a direct causal link between the stuff that people say and the stuff that people say online to how people behave in the real world. And I think you guys have got it right. Because you've got the Brandenburg test. Do you know about the test for incitement to violence in the US?
No, what is that?
It's basically a test that was established, I think, back in the 60s. It was a KKK leader called Clarence Brandenburg who was prosecuted for incitement to violence. And the test that was established since that precedent was that any words that can be convicted for incitement to violence, they have to be intended to cause violence, likely to cause violence, and the violence must be imminent. And if you satisfy that threshold, you can be prosecuted in the US for incitement to violence. So it'd be like imagine a demagogue surrounded by all his fans, whipping up a frenzy and then pointing to a guy on the front row and saying, kill him now. That would qualify for the Brandenburg test. Right. But in the UK, because we don't have that test, all we've got is whether people found it offensive. That's the difference of the threshold. So it's a massive difference between what the US has and what the UK has.
Massive.
It's insane. I mean, to give the most obvious recent example, because I don't know if people know about this, there's a woman called Lucy Connolly in the UK. I don't know if this was reported over here at all. Do you remember we had all these riots last year during the summer when against hotels which were housing asylum seekers, and people were setting fire to them? There were genuinely racist stuff going on, right, during those riots. And this was off the back of a guy who'd murdered a bunch of little girls in a dance class. And there were rumours going around that this was an asylum seeker, right? And this one woman, a mother, who'd lost her daughter, very sensitive about the idea of Lucy Connolly, she's very sensitive about the idea of loss of kids. She tweeted in a fit of anger, Go and burn down all the hotels for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it. And take the government with you, something like that. And she deleted it within a couple of hours. She went out, walked a dog, she deleted it. And she thought, that's not me, that's not who I am. Deleted it. Police came, went to court, sentenced to 31 months in prison for that swiftly deleted tweet. And she served over a year.
Oh, my God.
Now, I'm not saying the tweet was nice, right? The tweet was a horrible tweet. And she says it was a horrible tweet. That's why she deleted it. But because we don't have that Brandenburg test, we don't have a test for incitement to violence. Because the key is that tweet, there was no way it could have... She was a nobody. You know, she wasn't someone with influence. She didn't have many followers. No one was going to read that and go and act upon it. And if they did, that would be on them, right? Because this is a myth. This myth that people act on cue to what they read online isn't real.
It influences people, for sure. But at what point are you required to have sovereignty over your own mind and your own actions?
Yeah. Well, I think what it does is it raises the temperature, particularly when political leaders do it.
Right, but my point is, like, it's not going to incite you to violence. It's not going to incite me to violence. So who are we talking about? This is part of the thing, is like they're protecting the dumbest members of society. This is like the thing about banning, crazy talk online. If you're talking about witches or, whatever it is, flat Earth. Like, we have to stop misinformation. But from who? It's not working on you, right?
Yeah,
you don't believe it. So who are we protecting? We're protecting the dumbest people?
Also, aren't you kind of letting them off? Like, if someone goes and commits an act of violence and said, oh, I did it because someone told me to do it, aren't you kind of letting them off the hook?
Right. Exactly.
And sort of displacing the blame. It's like that guy who shot John Lennon, who said Catcher in the Rye made him do it. Reading the book Catcher. Are we now blaming J.D. Salinger for the murder of John Lennon? It was John Lennon, wasn't it? I think he did. Yeah. So do you... I think the safest approach is to say people are responsible for their own actions. I think the best that you could say is when political leaders and people with clout say things like that, it's say, it's fine to go out and commit violence. I think what they do is they create a kind of imprimatur of approval. They create this kind of sense that if you do it, the people in charge will have your back. If you do it, it's okay.
Well, this was the argument with Trump for January 6th. Right. And that's why the BBC edited his speech to make it look as if that's what he was saying.
You saw that clip, right?
Oh, my God. It's fucking crazy.
I mean, I've been saying for a long time the BBC has a real... Like, what I will say in the BBC's defense is they've always been pretty good at being party politically neutral. Like, they will interrogate someone in the right and someone in the left in a pretty neutral way. They don't... I think they do pretty good... I know people will be annoyed at me for saying that, but I think they do. But I think in terms of the ideology, the woke ideology, they got captured. They have a thing at the BBC called the LGBT desk, or they had it up until recently, which could veto any news story, which meant that any story that was slightly critical of trans activism or anything like that just didn't get reported. So I'm not surprised that the BBC...
They gave them veto power?
They gave them veto power, yeah.
That's crazy.
This all came out in a report, quite a recent report just a few months ago, which led to the resignation of Tim Davie, the Director General. And he resigned ostensibly because of that Trump clip, which, by the way, that wasn't the first time they did it. There was another clip about a year before in a different program that did the same thing. Took the clip, re-edited it, and made it look like he had said something he absolutely had not said. So I think the BBC quite obviously has an ideological bias, if not a party political bias.
But that's more than a bias.
Well, it's misleading, right?
Yes, it's completely deceptive. You're editing something and change. I mean, they took out a giant chunk of his speech. Yeah, I forget how many minutes it was.
They leapt like 45 minutes or something. Like, so he said
something crazy like that.
Yeah, he said it made him look like he was saying, "Go and commit the right." Yeah, exactly.
And instead, he was in tongue in cheek, talking about the very fine senator, that they're doing a great job, the senators and congresspeople, and said all this other stuff.
It's so weird.
Said you have to fight like hell to keep your country.
I mean, no offense, but you can find daft stuff that Trump says pretty easily, right? You don't need to edit that stuff down.
Well, it's because they had an opportunity to, like what we were saying earlier, we were talking before the show, you can put out a narrative